Welcome back to Ask a Coroner, the podcast where we answer the questions people have always wanted to ask about death investigations. I'm Mark Hammond, the Boyd County Coroner.
I'm Bailey Rucker, Deputy Coroner.
And tonight we're going to conclude our three-part series about the most delicate investigations that we handle.
And this series is specifically focused on child deaths. So we talked about, what we do during those deaths, how they're investigated, and then the tragic losses they are and the preventable deaths that we handle a lot. So what's this part going to talk about specifically?
This one, we're going to get into the aftermath. We're going to talk about what happens after the case is over, what happens a lot of times with families, how long the investigation takes. We're going to look at mainly the toll it takes on everybody that's helped with this investigation. I think that's a big thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people never think about the aftermath. The families actually have to sit down and think about the funeral home that's going to take care of their child when they should, like we've mentioned, should never have to bury a child. So why are they thinking about that funeral home? How hard is that on them? So what are kind of the things that you maybe prepare the family for once you're leaving the scene?
One of the biggest things I tell all families is that this case is going to take a long time. It's nothing that we're going to find out overnight. It's nothing that we're going to find out in a week because, as you know, and I've said this many times, I will not give a family an answer unless I'm 100% sure. So with saying that, with child deaths, a lot of times you're looking, instead of 30 to 45 days, you're looking months a lot of times. And the reason you're looking at months is because there's so many things that has to be done. From the autopsy, we may get something preliminary. If it's abuse, yeah, we're going to know that right away. But if it's not, and it's a medical issue, there's a lot of things that has to happen, such as they do histology. So they're pulling a lot of different samples and looking at slides. They want to look and study different organs a lot more than they would an adult. A lot of people don't realize how delicate those investigations go a lot of times.
And sometimes they even send that kind of stuff off too to get like a second opinion or something on it to make sure that everything is concrete.
And you're exactly right. Even with an abuse case, if we're talking, say, a shaken baby, a lot of times with shaken baby syndrome, that specific, the brain and the retinas of the eyes, things like that, that gets sent off to a specialist they have under contract. One of the cases that I could go back and talk about with a shaken baby was the simple fact that we waited a year. It took 1 year almost to the day before the autopsy finally came through. And we knew, I mean, just the preliminary and doing this for so long, you knew that it was an abuse case, but you couldn't do nothing about it. You had to have all the concrete evidence. And so when that happened, it took almost a year before we were able to make an arrest and arrest the mother and the boyfriend or father of the child. And in turn, people's waiting. They want answers. We live in an instant society, so I think people think instantly, like a TV show, okay, in an hour we're going to solve this, and that's not true at all.
Let me go arrest somebody and
exactly
put it to rest.
Yeah, I mean, even if we know pretty much concrete, it's still going to take a while to get your case put together, get everything so solid, because you don't want to jump the gun. And if you jump the gun and you go ahead and do something, then what happens then? Your stuff's not back. People have to have a speedy trial. There's a lot of things that happen that you don't want to jeopardize anything whatsoever. So we take our time when we do these.
So all of that time, you're waiting for autopsy results, you're waiting for toxicology, the family's planning a funeral, all of these results that you're waiting to happen. How do you talk to those families when all of those what if scenarios are playing through their head? What if I did this? What if I did this? What if this is actually what happened?
And I try to treat it the same as I would an adult a lot of times. Is I tell the family, I don't have answers. I don't know 100% why this happened. I'm going to get you answers. That's my whole job, is to give that family what they need to have somewhat of a closure. Will they ever have closure? No,
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't matter if it's an accident, if it was an abuse case to where it's a homicide, or whether it's natural death. People are not supposed to bury their kids. So especially when it comes to adults, I'm a parent. I don't want to bury my child. Uh, the good thing, and I'll say this right off the bat, what I love about funeral homes in this area, at least, funeral homes will always help that family out, because a lot of these people don't have life insurance on a
Mm-hmm.
child. Why would you think you would need that a lot of times? So that funeral home will work with that family and make sure that that child is taken care of. We have children that are buried in our county cemetery. And we had a gentleman that came through probably 2 or 3 years ago, and he wanted names and he wanted to know where they were at, because he wanted him and his wife was deceased at that time, but they had set up some type of fund to where he put headstones on graves of children that didn't have headstones on them. And I thought that was just neat. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that guy was out. He didn't have to do that, not by any means, but he wanted to do something for that child, and that's what makes things a lot of times. When a child death happens, it gets notarized so much more than when an adult dies. And the reason being, of course, you're not supposed to bury your kids, but that really hits the public hard when
Mm-hmm.
that happens. If it's, a child death, because when people look at that, it's like, oh, okay, that person was 70, 80, 90 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we expected them to pass away. We don't expect the 18-month-old that burns up in a house, or the person, or the 4-year-old that was in a car wreck because the car rolled over and they weren't in a car seat and they weren't restrained like they should be. They don't, that's the things that people hear about on the news so much, and it crushes everybody's heart because they're a child.
Mm-hmm.
So, we try to work those, and I try to stay in communication with families. If they call, I try to return that phone call. Hey, this is where we're at. We got a preliminary back. It really is not showing anything, and this is where we're at with the investigation. You got to wait. And they'll call. They'll call sometimes 2 or 3 times in a month. Hey, you got anything back? Have you got anything back? Because they want to know.
Yeah.
That's the big thing, and we try to make sure that that happens.
And I mean, we've talked about it. Every case gets handled. We show compassion, everything, but these cases specifically, like we've mentioned, are just so emotional. That compassion takes over, and you try to be there as much as you can for them without letting your emotions get in the way of maybe what you think happened in the case or whatever. Everything on that scene is just so emotional. How do you keep it together to help keep the family together?
I think you got to take one step back. And when I say take one step back, you got to take that deep breath, and you have to control those emotions. And that's the hardest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
As an investigator, it's hard. But in my mind, controlling those emotions keeps me focused on what has to happen. You know as well as I do, in our office, there's probably very few kid deaths. And when I say kids, I'm talking birth even to 18, that truly get worked by somebody else. 9 times out of 10, 99% of the time, I'm there. And the reason I'm there is to make sure that emotions don't get too high and make sure that every step gets done. That's the most important thing that you can do, because if you miss that step, a lot of times you're not going to give the answers that you need. And a lot of times emotions will cause you to miss those steps. So you have to take that deep breath, stand back and go, oh, okay, wait a minute. We
Mm-hmm.
forgot to check the temperature in the house. That's one of the things on the SUDA form,
Mm-hmm.
check the temperature of the house, see what's on the thermometer, make sure what's in the refrigerator, make sure, and we take pictures of all that. If it's something that's supposed to be a child had fallen, where did they fall? We get pictures of that. We take pictures and measurements of that stuff. All that stuff that we don't do on a daily basis. It's kind of like working EMS. In EMS, you can take care of 1,000 adults, but you get that one child, and everybody kind of freaks out because you don't remember the drug calculation. You don't do this, you don't do that. So in EMS, guess what? We have a bag that has like a Barslow tape, and you roll that out, and it's like
Strictly for
boom. Yeah,
peds.
it's
Like,
strictly for peds. So it's like, okay, it's yellow.
mm-hmm.
Grab the yellow bag. Now we know exactly what we do. In this case, I keep folders
Mm-hmm.
specifically for kids to where I'm like, okay, I've got the folder. Now let's go down the list. And then I try to be very calculated when I do that. And I recommend that for anybody that does investigations is you have to be calculated on what you're doing. Don't miss a step. Don't just take for granted that you can jump over something without hitting all the marks, because those become important. That one thing that you forgot or the one thing that you don't do can cost you, number one, your credibility, number two, the office's credibility, and number three, just knowing, giving answers to the family. All those become important.
Yeah. That kind of moves on to the next point is that a lot of people, I think first responders can just move on from a call. No matter what it is, they just move on to the next one because that's what their job is. That's what they're supposed to do. But these specifically, and we really don't. I mean, we've talked about the compartmentalization. Every single call we work just goes back and back and back. But these you really cannot move on to. And they are so, it takes such an emotional toll on somebody to work a child's death.
Well, I think you take it personal. I mean, when you look at something like that, it is personal. But if you take it really personal, then you get back into the emotions. So people are going to do different things. People are going to find a way to compartmentalize it, and people are going to find a way to handle their stress. Big thing is you got to handle that in a productive way.
Mm-hmm.
That may be talking to people. We've talked about regroup and counselors like that do show up when something bad happens, especially with kids and things like that. They're there for responders, and that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Mental health is very important. We've had cases before to where I've had somebody in the office go, "Hey, this something's not right. I really need to talk to somebody," and
Mm-hmm.
I'll pick up the phone, make a phone call, and get somebody in the office to where they can talk to them, because their mental health is just important to me as the child that died and the family. I think resources are important. Talk to the family and say, hey, you need to find somebody to talk to. Here's you a number, or here's you a list of resources that in turn can help you get through this. Grieving is a hard process because everybody grieves different. And that's the big thing. First you're going to deny that it's even happening. And then, by the time you reach the anger stage, you're angry because all the clothes were cut off the infant, and in turn, they went into bio waste, and all the family wanted was that onesie back or whatever. But in reality, that's hard for us to give something like that back. We take as much things as we can. We look for, okay, if it had a bottle, we're taking the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
That bottle becomes evidence now, and it's hard for families to understand that. It's like reconstructing. Reconstructing. I've had several police officers even that say, "All this looks normal. Why are you reconstructing that scene?" And it's like, well, because I reconstruct every scene, and the reason I reconstruct those scenes is a simple fact that in turn I don't want to miss anything. Or why did you charge somebody with the death when it was just an accident? Well, it wouldn't have been an accident if somebody didn't have access to a weapon or something like that. You got to protect kids.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, sometimes those are hard decisions that happen in an investigation that when you turn it over to prosecution, it's not me. I'm not the one that says, okay, we're going to prosecute this. What I do though is turn that over and let the evidence land where it lands
And speak for
and speak
itself.
for itself. And that's the biggest thing. And we've said this over and over again. When we're talking about kids' deaths or any death, the evidence stands for itself. And if you follow the evidence, it's not going to lead you wrong. It's going to give you the answers that you need, right or wrong, or what people don't want to hear a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. And I think, like, we may not have a kid's death all year, and then 1 month we have three back to back. When it rains, it pours. And we can't necessarily take a break from that. You know, we might need a break. We might be mentally exhausted, but we can't take a break from that. We can only try to help ourselves get through it and help each other and stuff. So, how do you handle that and not being able to maybe take a step away that you need to?
A lot of times these cases will drain you mentally and physically, because by the time this isn't okay on a normal case when we work it, and you know this as well as I do, you know, you're looking maybe 3 hours, 4 hours, and you can put that case to bed and get the test and then sign it out and you're done. With a child, it's an all day thing, it's an
Hmm.
all evening thing, it may be an all day thing, an all night thing, because that becomes that becomes the point to where you totally get mentally exhausted working this case. And the reason being is my drive, at least, is to give those answers. That's my whole drive. I had a police officer one time, and it's been not too long ago. A child was in the ER, it was deceased, and I in turn called the state police. I called the Child Protective Services. I went down the list, calling. And he called, and it was almost like he was offended that I picked up the phone and made those phone calls, because when he was on the scene, he didn't see anything.
Hmm.
And like I told him, it's not the fact you didn't see anything; it's the fact that I follow these steps. And Child Protective Services has to be called. They're going to be able to give me information that I don't have.
Yeah, we
And
set protocols for a reason. It's not
yeah,
to hurt anybody's feelings.
yeah, it's not to hurt feelings. And I think a lot of times with kids, people get their feelings hurt really quick
Hmm.
because it's so emotional, just like you said. So their part of the investigation is totally different than my part of the investigation. I talked about a case before, I think, in one of the series, one of the parts here was, you know, we had a kid that was worked into the ER, and I picked up really quick that that kid I thought was abused, but people in that ER knew the mother, and
Hmm.
they kind of took offense that I
Hmm.
was questioning her the way I was questioning her and different things like that. But in reality, I needed those answers.
Hmm.
And the answers she gave actually helped with the case, because we could go back in and say, oh, okay, yeah, she said this and this didn't match up, or
Yeah.
this didn't match up. And so those become important. And so when somebody dies, it doesn't matter if I know them or don't know them. My job is to give those answers. And I think with any child death, that's the biggest thing you can do. You kind of got to take all that out of the picture, and you can't get tunnel vision, and you got to concentrate, and you got to put the blinders off and work just like you would any other scene, but have checklists.
Hmm.
Checklists matter. Any coroner's office or any medical examiner's office, I'll say right off the bat, you know, have a checklist for things that you don't do often. It's not just child deaths, but drownings is another one. You know, how often do you do drownings? So let's have a checklist of, let's take a water sample, let's do this, let's do that, because that stuff matters. Uh, what's the temperature of the water? All this stuff, and so you're looking at those, and it's the same thing with a child death or any death that you have that you don't do often enough to where you're really good at it. And when I say really good at it, it means, you know, you want to be able to not miss anything. And that's where we come in, and we don't want to miss anything.
Hmm. And the we talk about how long the testing and stuff takes to get back. And the hardest part sometimes is also us waiting for those tests to come back, for our inclinations to, you know, say, yeah, this is what happened, or no, this isn't what happened. It could have been this. All, that waiting game for us, even outside of the families, you know, trying to give them answers. It's so hard for us to wait to get answers and put that or case to rest. Because even the case you just mentioned, that was 4 or 5 years ago, and I still think about it. You know,
Yes.
couple of days of the week, I'm like, man, I need this to hurry up. Like,
Well, we want closure.
yeah.
And so if we've charged somebody and they're sitting there in jail you know, and Commonwealth's attorney's got the case, and they've, you know, took it to a grand jury, and now the people's in jail, and you're just waiting. And what most people don't realize is you wait sometimes 2, 3, 4 years before it goes to
Mm-hmm.
trial. And one of the things I'll say, and we go back to paperwork, paperwork is crucial on cases like this because you can't make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
You got to make sure that if something happens to you tomorrow and you're the investigator, that I could pick that case up and I could read it in court and I knew exactly, I could put myself back at that scene. That matters. And there's so much technology now, as you've seen recently, you know, in murders and different things that we're working, a couple of homicides. When you look at the homicides and stuff, and they bring out a total station now
Mm-hmm.
that will, basically measures everything around that scene and does 3D modeling.
Yeah, it recreates it into like a little tiny. It's insane.
Yeah, and so
Really
we've
is.
never seen that
Yeah.
before. And so when you look at that, it's like, wow. So those are technologies that really play a role in what we do and how we investigate things now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing is you got to collaborate so good with all the law enforcement agencies you're dealing with, such as, you know, making sure the police are on the same page. Get them there early.
Mm-hmm.
Get the detectives there early that you need. Use those resources. You want to make sure that Child Protective Services are called in early because they're going to give you the information. I can pick up the phone and make that phone call right now, and I know by giving her what the child's name is, the mother, the father, in no time she's going to spit back information to me saying if they've ever been in the system, do they have how many substantiated and how many unsubstantiated cases they have. All that stuff comes to play. And you may not need that. I mean, by the time everything gets said and done, you may say, okay, this is not it's not an abuse case, so we don't need the special team.
Mm-hmm.
But I would much rather have those people there and say, we don't need you now, compared to not having them and go, oh, 3 days later, 4 days later, calling them going, hey, I really need your help.
Yeah.
So if you work that scene the same every single time, guess what? You're not going to mess that up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that becomes a big role, but you're exactly right. Seeing cases like this until the case is A, closed, or B, prosecuted, then there's a lot of sleepless nights. There's a lot of things that you wake up to going, okay, did I miss this? Did I get this right? Especially leading up to trial, if it goes to trial, things like that that come into play. It's like you're running that scene through your head about 1,000,000 times compared to, okay, this is a 56-year-old and they died of a heart attack. The tox is back and we sign that case out in 3
Mm-hmm.
weeks. This doesn't happen that way. So you lose a lot of sleep over these cases.
Mm-hmm. And like we've mentioned, we're not the only people on scene. We've got police, fire, EMS, most of the time, especially with a kid, emergency department personnel, all of these people, and they want answers too in a way to put themselves at rest as well. So we'll go out and people will say, hey, you got an update on that yet? Did this come back? Was it actually what we thought? Like all that stuff, because they think about it too. They see it.
And we hear that all the time. You know, I guarantee you I can walk in the ER if the same people were in there 4 or 5 years down the road,
Mm-hmm.
and I can mention a case and they're like, I worked that night.
Mm-hmm.
I was there when that happened, or whatever happened with that, or, you know, I felt sorry for that kid. And when you look at things like that, you got to be objectable too. And when I say that, what I mean is when you're looking at the scene, does things make sense? The kid is dirty. Well, guaranteed if it's 2 or 3 years old, it's going to be dirty most of the,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I laugh because people say you never go to the ER when you're clean and you got your hair fixed and you got your makeup on, you got all this stuff. It's the same way when a kid gets hurt. When a kid gets hurt, usually you're wearing old clothes, you look like you're homeless, and you're out on the street,
Yeah.
and you come walking in there and they're going, what happened to you? You look like a hard Saturday night. And I'm going, no. So, when you look at that stuff, it's like, don't judge that child or judge the family
Mm-hmm.
just because the child's dirty. It hadn't been long ago. We had a case, and when I walked in, it was like, okay, the fingernails are dirty, the kid's dirty, but that kid had probably been playing in the yard. Maybe the mother didn't have time to put it to bed, and when you talk to the family, you realize that she's taking care of 2 or 3 other kids, and that one just hadn't made it there yet that night, and she was exhausted, so she put it to bed and let it go to sleep and was going to give it a bath the next morning. So there's a lot of things that come into play that if we judge something, then it's going to lead us down the wrong path. So never judge anything. It's like a kid that has bruises on its shins, and it's like, man, that kid looks like it's been beat to death. But in reality, if you look at a 2 to 3 year old child, it's going to have bruises on its
It's
shins.
bumping and
Yeah,
toys and crawling around.
exactly. So you look at things that are not normal. Okay, now it's got those same bruises on its arms. Is that normal? No, it's not. The normal is the bruises on the shins because they're running into things and they're bumping things, not the fact that their arms are bruised up. And then you go, okay, now what's going on? And then they've got places on their back. That's why and a lot of people say, why do they do this? But one of the things Child Protective Services does, if there's other kids in the residence, one of the things they have to do is lay eyes on those other kids. And when I say lay eyes on those other kids, it's lift your shirt up. They're looking for things that we don't see even, and that's part of the puzzle. And without calling them in and getting them in, that puzzle's not all the way solved. So that's why they're there. They're experts in certain things. It's like when we started talking, when we first started doing this show, and we were talking about police. Law enforcement are trained to do several things, but death investigation, they're trained a little bit in. That's why we're there. We are trained to do death investigation. That's my thing. The same as Child Protective Services, they're trained to look for abuse. They're trained to look for things that doesn't matter to us, but it matters to them to where they can put pieces together and go, no, this doesn't make sense, and this is why. So take that expertise and run with it.
And one thing that I think gets looked over, and I don't even know if we've mentioned it because it kind of just ran through my head, is the role that the dispatch center plays in these cases as well, and how they're kind of stuck not even being on the scene to, maybe be hands on help. They're just taking things through the radio, getting updates here and there, when the call first comes in that it's a child, then CPR is in progress and all of this stuff. And they're like doing the behind the scenes work that nobody sees.
The 911 centers, in my opinion, as a dispatcher, probably has one of the hardest jobs there ever is, because they live with that voice every single day.
Yeah.
When somebody calls and it's the mother or the father that's found the child and they're not breathing, and they try to walk them through on how to do CPR and all this stuff that goes on, and knowing that in a way, yes, they're helping, but in a way they know they're not going to save that person. That gets stuck in their heads just the same as what we have to go through. So, dispatchers are the unsung heroes of making sure that instructions get done, that they can tell us, okay, the house is brick or the house is white vinyl siding or whatever, because at that time people just want to get there. They're trying to just get there, and the dispatcher can walk them through. And we have some really great dispatchers that do that.
Yeah.
That really never get credit during anything, except they have a telecommunications week, and we try to do things for them during that week. But in reality, they're the unsung heroes. They're the ones that answer that call and make sure everything happens on the back end. It's like the call itself. We want that recording. We want to hear what's going on in the call and listen to it to see if we can pick things out. And those matter a lot of times. So that matters to make sure it's just another piece of the puzzle. Get the call and see what it says.
Yeah. And we've kind of already mentioned this, especially in our mental health episode itself, but first responders a lot of time already deal with PTSD, anxiety, depression. How these cases are certainly triggers for anybody. So how does that get dealt with, and how do they keep it together?
I think people deal with all that differently. Luckily, I like to talk,
Yeah.
as obvious. But, you know, I would much rather talk about it
Mhm.
than I would, and it's running things through people. You know, it's like, okay, this and this and this happened. What did I do different? You know, we're helping with a case right now that we're not going to talk about. But with that case, before we started working yesterday, uh, I made phone calls. Made phone calls Sunday. I spent my Sunday making phone calls to coroners that are a lot more experienced than me, going, okay, this is what I have, and this is what I did, or what I'm going to do. This is my game plan. What would you do different?
Mhm.
And I got several different answers to where, no, you got everything down the way you need, but maybe I would do this, or maybe I would do that. I was writing that stuff down because it's the same way with a kid death. I like to talk about it. Now, there's sometimes I don't talk about it. I've went home before and been able to completely lay down at 5 o'clock in the morning, and my wife roll over and go, you know, hey, I know you had a rough day. Do you want to talk about this? And it's like, nope, because if
Nope.
I talk about it, I ain't going to sleep.
Mhm.
I got to sleep. My mind has to be right. I sleep, you know, and I can make myself go to sleep for 2 or 3 hours, but then I'm up and I'm back at it and I'm hitting it pretty hard. But you got to know your limitations a lot of times. One of the people that we listened to at conference recently, he was the CEO over the Missing Children's Foundation,
Mhm.
and that was the one thing that he told everybody in the room was that when they arrive, a lot of times people look like zombies because they've worked that case so hard. And the first thing he'll say is, you got to rest.
Mhm.
You got to walk away from it and rest. Well, we can't, we're programmed to not walk away from things. So it may be the fact that we stop and take a break for a few minutes and all we do is talk back and forth about the case. And everybody's like, well, why do you want to do that? Because you're mentally drained. Well, because in reality, that helps a lot of first responders. A lot of first responders want to talk about it.
Mhm.
Those that don't, I understand that. And we don't want to force anybody into anything. But uh, talking helps. Most people that do our job and do first responder work are type A personalities. So they're constantly on I say edge a lot of times, and it is heightened awareness is a huge thing with PTSD in our field. But I think everybody stays there. If you see the heightened awareness kick in a little harder, you see people get more irritable, things like that, you need to take that step back and you need to talk to that person, maybe one on one, get some counseling going up there and seeing what's going on. Unfortunately, we have had, you know, some child deaths recently, from different things, from fires, accidents, different things like that, natural causes. And in turn, on those, everybody always in the back of your mind, you're going, what could I have done different?
Mhm.
And all really and truly they want to know is it would have been the same outcome. Because if they could have did something different, they would have saved that person. We know that. And I say all the time in the mental health field, I look at things as I'm here to help as far as to give closure in this job. Uh, and one of the hardest things I ever did was when I first became the coroner or started working in the coroner's office was before I didn't have to realize all I had to do was work that body or work that patient to the hospital.
Mhm.
That was it. I was done after that. But with this job, we're not done. This job takes a whole lot more mental toll on you than anything else you could ever do because mentally every day you're beat down.
Mhm.
And if you don't find a way out, and the same way with a child, the problem is with the kids' cases, these are the ones that keep on getting brought up and they keep brought up over and over and over and over again. And in turn, when that happens, that really takes the toll on you. So, talking, finding that outlet, whether it be exercise, whether that be reading, that whether that be playing a game, no matter what you're doing, find that outlet because you're going to need it.
Mhm.
This isn't something that's solved overnight. So you're going to need that help and you're going to make sure that you get that help. Everybody needs to watch out for each other. That's a big thing. You may see something I don't, and in turn say, "Hey, let's sit down. Let's talk about this." So it's very important that we keep an eye on each other, take care of each other. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. And I think another thing to talk about is the heightened awareness and how these scenes are scenes that you'll never forget. When, like, I can tell you the way the police lights were flashing on a house at nighttime with one of these cases, or the way the neighbors' dogs were barking. The lights and sounds and just things that you're hearing and seeing that just get brought up on different scenes that might take you back to that place.
Oh, there's scenes, especially with kids, that I could go back in. I started doing this in 1985, and I think I talked about one time as a firefighter. We rolled up on a house on a trailer, and we had 6 kids and an adult in that
Mm-hmm.
trailer that was deceased. And we ran. It was a mutual aid call to other fire from another fire department. That fire department had never seen that a day
Yeah.
in their life,
Yeah.
let alone one child, but 6. And in turn, we went in and it was like, okay, you need to move over here. You all need to take a break. We'll take care of this. And then we handled the case, and we handled the scene as a fire department, because the look on their face looked like something had just hit them right between the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
They were that stunned to see something like that, and it's going to stun anybody. But you're exactly right. You can, and vividly, you can think back of, okay, this is who was on that scene. This is how many vehicles were on that scene. The weather.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked about mental health before. There's certain nights that weather will trigger I don't sleep
Mm-hmm.
really well, sometimes because of the weather, and it's triggering calls in the back of my mind. So that happens, and kids is probably 10 times worse.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked about the emotional weight, the toll that it takes on us, and how kind of the compassion that it takes to deal with families. But how important is it to remain professional and still get that job done, which we've kind of touched on. But the professionalism, how does that aspect?
And I think that's huge because I think these 3 episodes, you'd be surprised at who listens out there
Yeah.
to us. And I've had mothers that reach out, and the other day I woke up and somebody had sent a message and said, I still remember the day that my child died, and the compassion you had of helping me through all this,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what we're here for. We're here to sit down and walk them through.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to walk an adult through on what's going to happen, but when you take a kid, especially a child's death, there's 100 more things that you got to walk that family through.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said before, picking the funeral home, giving the family time with a child. Now, do I do that right away? No, I
Mm-mm.
don't. And that's because I want a fresh look at the child. I want to see what the child looks like. I want to make sure that that child's not abused or anything like that. But guaranteed, before I put that child in a body bag like anybody else, that's reality. Reality is it goes in a body bag. And before we do that, I will give the mother and father and anybody else, the grandparents or whatever, time with that child, because that's time they're never going to get back. And I don't care if it's an adult or a child. And you know this, I've said this before. Everybody's like, "What's took you so long?" Well, I don't make anybody leave the room.
Mm-hmm.
I will gladly stay as long as I need to stay, because I never want anybody, if it was my child, I wouldn't want to be rushed.
Yeah.
So I'm not rushing anybody else. That's compassion. That's caring. That's making sure that you're doing the scene and you're doing everything that needs to be done. But at the same time, you are also making sure that the family has that little bit of time with that child. That's the last time they're going to have that.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to rush anything when it comes to that.
Yeah. And I don't know why, but I think it's because you said the term body bag. But we have like peds body bags, and so even like saying that and having to get that out and put a child in a body bag that's the size of it, that alone is enough to send somebody in a spiral.
And you're exactly right. I mean, as well as I do, it takes special people to work in the ER.
Mm-hmm.
Nurses are special people, anyways, but there's certain nurses that's built to work in an ER.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care how long you've been there. I don't care how hard you are from working in that ER because it's a whole different ball game.
Mm.
It's like the Wild West in an ER. You will see those nurses just totally crumble,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one of those things that the last thing we do is remove the child, and that's probably the hardest thing in the world on everybody. That's why we also, you mentioned, the special body bags. We have child, we have infant, and we have an adult, because we want to make sure that we're not putting an infant in an adult body bag, things like that, because to me those little things like that, they matter.
Mm-hmm.
That's what matters.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping those things. We had a girl one time, and it wasn't an infant. She was a teenager, and it was an accidental shooting. It was an actual accidental discharge of a weapon, and in turn, we had her personal property, which consisted of a belt and a pair of boots. And I picked up the phone, and we made a phone call to the mom, and the mom was like, I never thought I'd see those again. And it's like, yeah, we had those.
Mm-hmm.
Those didn't have any bio on them as far as blood or anything like that. And she come and picked those up because that meant the world to her. So little things like that, if you can do something little like that, I think that goes a long way with the families.
Mm-hmm. And families have to be there for each other. We have to be there for each other. The support system is sometimes, well, most of the time, the most important part in these investigations. Having people there to support you to get through to the next day.
And it is. I mean, and a lot of people, we always talk about infants and small children, but this day and time, we also deal with teenagers that are suicides, teenagers that are deceased in accidents, and all those things that go through. Even though they're older, they're still considered a kid, and we still have things to do. And a lot of times people miss those things. So just because somebody is 16, 17 years old, they still fall under the child as far as when it comes to jurisdiction. So all the special paperwork has to be done, all that has to be put in place. And a lot of people will miss that. Well, why am I calling Child Protective Services? Well,
Mm-hmm.
because they're under
They're a
18 years
child.
old.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that gets you tunnel vision a lot of times.
Yeah. So, this being the last episode of this specific series, which went really well, got a lot of good feedback from it. So, maybe we'll do a couple more series. But from this one specifically about child deaths from start to finish, what do you hope listeners take away from?
I want them to really understand that these deaths are special, number
Mm-hmm.
one. Uh, every death is special to us as far as our office goes. But with a child death, things are not going to happen overnight. We are going to work it just like we would any other case, except there's a lot more. We're doing double and triple of what has to happen. You're going to see people that you've never seen before walk through your door, that want to talk to you, that ask you questions, things like that. So the big thing is, I want the audience to understand that these are the most delicate cases we'll ever handle.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. The second thing is, you got to give us time. And I know people want instant things, but I'm not going to give answers that I don't know. So time is a big part of this. The third thing is, they're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
There is several organizations out there for grieving families that a lot of times people don't take advantage of to begin with, but then they fall into that place later on in life. And that's great, because I think mental health is so important, not only for first responders, the dispatchers, people that work EMS, fire, police, but also families. Death, a lot of times, especially of a child, will break a family apart. And they probably need each other more than they ever will through this whole thing. So I think that becomes important that we need to look at. And then the biggest thing is, we're not investigating this saying that you did anything wrong as a
Yeah.
parent. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
Is you could do everything totally right, and then that child dies.
Yeah.
I told somebody earlier today, child deaths come up, and one of the things I said was that we've worked a lot of child deaths that are natural causes because of medical conditions that kids have.
Mm-hmm.
So just because we're working that death and we're asking you 10,000 questions that you don't want to answer because your child just died, but we need those answers to make the investigation move forward. And that's the hardest part because you know as well as I do, when deaths like this happen, we may have 20 family members. And the first thing I do is say, okay, I need mom and dad. I need the two next of kin people or the caregivers. And I move them into another room. And the reason I do that is so I can talk one on one to them and get the ball rolling and get the questions answered. And then also, I make sure that they understand this is going to be a while
Mm-hmm.
and there's going to be other people talking to you. I think people are scared of the unknown.
Yeah.
No matter if it's adults, if it's kids, it's daily things. People are scared of the unknown. So if we can tell them what we're doing and why we're doing it, it eases them a little bit. And that becomes important.
Yeah.
That becomes real important. We had a recent child death in a fire. And the thing about it was, when I came in the room, the mother knew me from an earlier death, but and she's the one that said this. She said, "I'm glad it was you." She said, "Because I know what you did last time for me. I know what you said last time," and she could repeat what I'd told her, and so that put her at ease. And she wasn't talking to anybody hardly, so that helped her and helped us with the investigation as we move forward. And so in that, I think if we can do that for families, we've did so much more than they have ever gotten before. And so this 3-part series, it hit home on a lot of things. It brings back a lot of cases, but I want the audience to know we're here for them. We're here for the families. We're going to make sure we get you answers. And if we can do anything at all, give you that little bit of closure. We know this isn't going to bring back your child. We know this is going to be totally different for the rest of your life. What a lot of people don't know is it's different for us for the rest of our lives too,
Mm-hmm.
because of the way we've had to do this and what we've had to investigate.
Yeah. And I think another big takeaway, and it kind of piggybacks off what you said, but every child gets to speak their truth. Every death that we handle, that person still needs to speak their truth, and it just happens to be our voice that has to speak for them. But everybody's going to get justice.
And you're exactly right. I mean, and that's the whole key is what a true death investigator and what people do in the coroner's offices across America and what people do in the death investigation offices across America is we speak for that person.
Mm-hmm.
They can't speak anymore. We have to find those answers. And with child deaths, it's just a lot more that we have to do to find those answers a lot of times.
So, thank you very much to everybody that has listened and supported these last 3 episodes. I think we had a very, very good response for them. If you have any ideas for what another mini series we could do, we would gladly take any recommendations, something that the public would be interested in us talking about.
And you're exactly right. I think in turn, the mini series was pretty cool. This is the first one we did.
Yeah.
We want to start having some people on that maybe falls into the mini series. One of the things we talked about was trying to get a parent that lost a child to come in and be a part of the guest, and we didn't do that this time, mainly because we had so much to talk about,
Yeah.
to be honest with you. But when we do other mini series, we may reach out and want that. So we want audience participation. Audience participation is the biggest thing that we can do. So if you got ideas, you got things you want to hear, please let us know. But we appreciate you all watching, and hopefully you've learned something.
Thank you.
Thank you.